Sear, our non-stimulant, thermogenic, and recomposition agent. Sear is a super cool product because it's going to help you utilize turning your white adipose tissue, which is for storage of fat, into brown adipose tissue, which is going to help with energy production. So this is great to use for a competition prep or in your weight loss phase. So you can stack it with a stimulant-based thermogenic, or you could also use it in your off-season or muscle building phase to help keep you lean and mean. Sear.
Welcome back to the Pro Physique Code. Man, we got a lot on this episode. I can't wait. The first national show of the season kicked off. Me and Steven drove up there. Evan went to New York, but didn't go to New York Pro. Hasn't explained that one to me yet. Lexie, you just stayed home.
Yes, I went to Anna Maria Island for a graduation party, but other than that, I was home.
Yeah, so I mean, Lexie, you and I and Evan, you and I, we've been to a lot of shows this year. You know, we've been to the Clash, the Girl Power, we've been to the Pittsburgh Pro. I went out to Salt Lake City. And so I knew the first thing we're going to talk about is the bikini division shrinking. Is the bikini division, what's changing, what's happening? We know when we go to these more typically competitive regional shows, like the first one is the Clash, the next one is the Girl Power, and the next one is the Pittsburgh. And even the Wasatch that I go to, those are all shows where you have top-notch judges. Sandy Williamson, Tyler Mannion, Steve DeVore was out in Wasatch. These are the judges that when you go to nationals are judging you. So competitors, coaches like to go to these shows to get feedback for their athletes, find out where they stand in the sport. Those shows were noticeably smaller this year, right, guys?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
So it stands to reason, you know, I kept saying, I just feel like NPC Junior USA's is going to be tiny. I haven't seen where the athletes are going to be that are going there. You know, national competitors can kind of get qualified the year before, take some time off, and they don't have to do a show leading up to it. I typically don't do that. I almost always put my girls that are, you know, going for their pro card into a show. Kalia won the overall in was it Las Vegas? I think it was a Las Vegas show in like February, right? So we had already done our qualification this year. Same with Sam, who won her pro card at the Arnold. We had done a show in LA just before. So like, you know, and Dana had won the overall in Virginia a couple weeks ago before Junior. So you typically see these girls, and the girl that won the overall at Girl Power, she got her pro card. You know, so you see these girls leading up. And I don't know. I went down the rabbit hole, guys. Seeing 52 competitors at a national show, it was a little shocking. It was small last year at 79.
And it's always, I feel like this is the national show that is kind of notoriously always a little bit smaller because it's the first one earlier in the year. But I mean, 50 something total competitors. I know I was watching on Saturday, I was watching another coach. She was posting some like behind the scenes and just some pictures from prejudging. And she said, I can't remember what class it was. There were like maybe 3 girls in one class. And I was like, oh my gosh.
I think it was C had 3 girls.
That's crazy. And I think what D was the biggest and it had like 9. Was that right?
D or E was the biggest. D was Kaylee's. D actually had a call out. That was one of the few classes where they had girls on the diagonal and they called out 6, and then they did a final call out with 4. So yeah, that, you know, and so what I did yesterday was I put up a question box and I took all that data and I plugged it all in here to my Excel spreadsheet. So we're going to answer all these questions about what's happening. And a lot of people said, well, don't less people do Junior USAs? Yeah, of course, because they only give out 4 pro cards. It's, you know, you got to win your class and then win top 4 in the overall. But 2018, they had 153, 2019, 139, 2020, 166. And then it's been 89, 81, 79. So maybe that number was kind of stable, but this year, 52. That is a huge decrease in the last year. Like it's so, and so what I did was, you know, I thought, okay, well, maybe everyone's going to junior national. So I asked Sandy, who is the promoter, how are your numbers for junior nationals? She said very low. So I'm expecting it to be up from junior USA's, but last year was only 117. The high I had for that show was 2019 at 206. Now, again, junior nationals is only class winners get their pro card, right? So maybe some girls go, you know what, I'll wait till universe, top 2 in a class get it, right?
Yeah.
But typically I find most of the girls are going to start doing the shows earlier.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
what do you think?
interesting too to hear that the numbers for junior nationals are so low, considering that this is the first year where Sandy's offering for the girls who turn pro to literally turn around and do a pro show that day. But I guess my thought behind that is I bet I bet the numbers will increase as the show gets closer, just since we still have a couple of weeks. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like people who have competed a lot are notorious for sometimes just hopping into shows. Not to say that somebody's just going to hop in last minute, but I feel like a lot of times competitors who have done this a longer period of time sign up for shows a little bit more last minute because they want to 100% make sure they're ready. So I feel like there may be some more signups, at least I hope, within the next couple weeks as the show gets closer. Because I mean, handing out as many pro cards as they do and then being able to get on the pro stage that day, that's a really awesome opportunity.
Did
Oh,
you
I'm
happen
sure
to
the
pull?
numbers will go up.
Did you happen to pull the numbers for Universe and North Americans?
Of course. So I dug into that too. Now, the reason I initially only did the 4 national shows I did was because those do not include masters numbers. And I thought I don't want to muddy the waters because I believe the masters are actually increasing in number. And I've been told that. So, but even they have decreased substantially. So Universe last year was 182 total in the open, 167 the year before. The high I had for them was 2018 at 232, right? So they're maintaining a little bit better. North American was down to 156 last year, which was the lowest they've been. They were as high as 269 in 2017. Nationals is the one show that seems to be maintaining their numbers pretty well. I think the reason for that is it's later in the season. So maybe we're going to see a bigger influx of competitors later in the year. But nationals in 2017, and the reason I started with 2017, that's the first year they introduced 8 classes. Prior to 2017, bikini was just 6. And I've actually got some interesting data on that too. So they had 276 in bikini alone in 2017. 276. Some of those classes were 45 girls, right? Now, toot my own horn. That was the year I had 2 girls in the overall, Cassie and Lauren Danimo, with Lauren winning the overall. So that was the biggest show on this whole board, the highest number of any show on this board. North Americans was close in 2020 with 275 just in bikini. But yeah, so that, and then nationals was down 2 years ago to 177, but they moved it to Texas last year. It jumped back up to 217. And for anyone that was paying attention to bikini last year, there was a show the week before nationals, Battle of Texas. There was 200 and an NPC national qualifier. Also, my girl won that overall, but actually both the girls I had in that show turned pro at nationals the next week. So like, that tells you something. Like Texas is banging right now.
Yeah.
So that might be,
Even on the men's side, I mean, when I did like North Americans a few years ago, I mean, there was a couple times there was 40 people, 35, 40 people in my class.
Yeah, I haven't, well, I will say Junior USA's was kind of small across the board. I haven't dug into the men's numbers, but I have felt for a while that the men's numbers were going up. The women's numbers were going down. So I actually wanted to track a little bit more data because someone said, well, what about it's because the girls are going to wellness? The numbers don't back that up. There was 18 wellness girls at Junior USA's. So if you throw those numbers in with the bikini, that puts us at 70 total females, but they had more wellness last year. So it's actually the bikini division that's actually a little bit smaller. And figure in 2017, Junior USA's had 63 figure competitors. This weekend they had 22.
Oh, wow.
So the figure division has really leveled off.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I wanted to check was, okay, does my experience going to NPC shows back up what's happening at the national level? In 2021, Border Clash, NPC Clash, the first big show of the year, had 76 open competitors. This year it had 29. right? So we're almost a third.
Wow.
Not quite a third, but that's a big drop. Way more than 50% drop off in open competitors at a show like Clash, where that was the year Kathy Seitz won the overall when they had 76, and she got paid entry, and then she won the overall at Universe that year. This year, the girl that won the overall at Clash also got her pro card. So that's usually a good indicator.
Yeah.
You win that overall, you're going pro.
Yeah, it is super, super interesting. And I'm really curious to hear, because I was, I know I texted you guys yesterday. I was just trying to rationalize and theorize like why the numbers would be so low. So I'm curious, Paul, like you put out the question on your Instagram. Did
Yeah.
you get some good answers?
So I got so many replies. I actually had to create an Excel spreadsheet, and I actually wrote down answer and then how many times that answer was given. So I'm going to go through all that stuff with you guys right here. But I also want to point out, so if we just talk about people that paid to enter a open national show for Bikini, 2017, there was 1,297 total between all the shows.
Okay.
Junior USAs, Junior Nationals, USAs, Nationals, Universe, and North Americans. Last year was 885. That is a 37% decrease in 6 years. So, and we'll dig into the reasons, but it's clearly, now that was last year. We're on pace this year to like drop well below that. Yeah. Very interesting. We'll see.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I have my theory, but I want to hear some of the other answers that you got, because
Well, and even like, we went up to the Pittsburgh Pro, which is that's the best show you could ever do as an amateur. You literally get to be judged by the Olympia judges. Yeah. And there was, I mean, if they did 6 classes, was there even 20 competitors, Lexie? There was a couple classes with 2 and 3.
Yeah, all the classes were extremely small. And I truly don't understand why. And I think we talked about this last week, just because as an amateur, at like an amateur regional show, when are you ever going to get Sandy, Tyler, Ettila, Steve, Bill, like all in the same judging panel? You won't. So part of me is like, part of me wonders if, because we always hear Pittsburgh Pro, part of me wonders if amateurs don't realize that there is like an amateur show attached to it. Or if it's just because it's a little bit earlier in the year as to why amateur numbers are so low. But I mean, I feel like if more amateurs, I honestly feel like there's just not enough amateurs that know that there is an amateur show and that you are literally getting a huge judging panel. I feel like if more people knew that, they'd be more likely to do the show. Why not? But I don't know. I don't know about that one.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's go through. So first I'm going to read off all the reasons what I was given, like, in the questions. And these are not in order of votes. This is just in the order that I got them. And then I started tallying up. So one said, athletes want to take longer time off to improve. Someone said better athletes in the sport. So it's intimidating. Cost of competing, inflation. Someone said more pro cards, which I get, but it still doesn't matter because all the shows are smaller, right? So I get why Junior USA's is smaller this year. It's always smaller. It's never been this small. The wellness division, that doesn't hold up because wellness division is actually shrinking. I haven't seen the numbers there. And I will say there was a couple girls at Junior USA's that are doing wellness, and I'm like, man, that's Bikini. You're just not in shape yet. There were a couple true wellness girls, obviously, like the overall winner. Not healthy. The sport is no longer healthy. They don't like the look of the competitors on PEDs. Masters numbers are increasing, which is actually true. Other federations. So people are competing with other organizations. A couple of people said the social media boom. So like when the social media platforms like Instagram were really taking off, competing became very in vogue, and they think that that's kind of dying off. It's early in the season. Totally agree. Some people say they've had a bad experience at a certain show, which we'll talk about. And then somebody said there's now too many shows. There's too many options, so that they're going to start getting smaller, which that wouldn't hold up for nationals. They're the same number of national shows. Regional shows, yeah. Florida shows, yeah, there's one every weekend. I agree. Texas only has 26 shows this year, and they have the most NPC cards. Florida has like what, 45 shows, and we're probably second or third in NPC cards. So like, why do we have almost double the shows? So but yeah, the number one reason was cost.
Yeah, and I mean that's where my mind went at first, because when you sent the numbers in the spreadsheet over yesterday, Paul, I was looking at it, and I mean, when you look at the year that things really started to decline, it was kind of right around that like 2020 year. And I feel like just, I don't know, inflation in general, I know a lot of people struggle. And I think, also with competing, it makes sense. Like the masters numbers are going up. And a lot of times those are the people who I feel like, not all the time, but masters in general are going to have a little bit more like discretionary income that they can spend, right? Whereas people who are really young, and this sport does attract a lot of young people. You get, girls doing this in college, right outside of college. That's usually not a notorious time in your life where you're going to have the most money you're ever going to have. So I could see how money could be a factor. Because, I thought about the other answer that somebody mentioned about people are taking more time off. And that's kind of what I thought at first too. But then seeing in the numbers, well, you would think if people are taking more time off that you would see kind of like a every other year jump back and forth with numbers, but we're really not seeing that. So that doesn't really support the fact that competitors are taking more time off. I don't know. I really do think the finances though, and just the economy, I feel like that's a big reason as to some of these numbers dropping.
Yeah, I think it's finances. I think things are way more expensive everywhere. So if you just think about food, right, and buying food and eating food, I mean, the prices are way higher now than they were a few years ago. So you put that in, it costs with travel costs and gas costs and flight costs and hotels are what, double what they were maybe 2 years
Yeah,
ago?
the hotels, even which I typically don't worry too much about costs when I travel because I consider it, cost of doing business. You can't. But even I have been like, whoa, I'm not paying $350 to stay at a Best Western. And, so I've been being a little more like, we got a really good deal at our Airbnb Lexie up in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah.
Like Airbnbs are now my go-to. Whereas before I was just book me at the host hotel. Not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think also like national shows in general, I mean, regional shows are still expensive, don't get me wrong, but especially if you have to travel, but national shows are also like,
Oh, so check
overpriced.
this out. So USA's was typically the largest show other than nationals. NPC USA Championships used to be in Las Vegas. It was
Oh,
one of
yeah.
the premier shows. 2017, no, I'm sorry, 2018, 232 competitors. The reason I remember that year is because Paige Riley turned pro that year. Paige was one of my like up and coming athletes. She was amazing, won an overall, won a pro card, and then just actually, you know what? She might be a good person to interview because she just left the sport, never came back. But that year they had 232 girls. Last year, 134. Now, this is the only national show that has continued to make it a 2-day show. So it was in Las Vegas last year. It was a 2-day show. I think that adds a lot to the cost. So I think that's why they saw their numbers drop.
Is nationals not 2 days anymore?
This year. So if you guys are thinking about competing, they've moved USA's to California, and it's a 1-day show for bikini now.
What about NPC nationals? Is it still it was men 1 day and female 2 days?
They made it 1 day a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think that, I mean,
for the bikini division.
Yeah, especially for
for the bikini division. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I'm only focusing on bikini now. Bikini athletes, well, but anybody that has to stay 2 days, extra hotel, sometimes extra makeup and tan,
extra makeup and tan in general, like that. Actually, the first show I ever did was the Europa, and actually even back then that was a 2-day show, and I mean I didn't know anything, and I remember the 2 days. It's it's a lot. It doesn't make any sense because it's already alone. Like I hate that big gap in the middle of the day between prejudging and finals, but like a whole day in between. But especially for female athletes, when you have the makeup, the tan, the hair, like that's a lot to go through 2 days in a row. And if you're getting it professionally done, that's double the expense for makeup and hair. And makeup and hair can be expensive too if you're getting it done by a really reputable makeup artist. So I'm glad to hear that they brought that the USA is down to a 1-day show this year.
Yeah, so I'll be curious to see if their numbers jump back up because California historically has a lot of competitors. I will say this. I've looked at a lot of the California shows. They have had very small numbers for bikini for NPC this year thus far. Now that may pick up. It is early in the year. There were a lot of people at nationals and a lot of people at the shows at the end of the year, but really it's just going to be time will tell. But I just went down this rabbit hole. And so, okay, so the most common answer was finance. The second most common answer is one that I love, taking a longer time off to fit the category.
Yeah.
And I think something we don't think about, you don't have to get on stage to be a bodybuilder. That's just one aspect of the sport that the three of us and, you know, our clients and we enjoy. But, you know, I typically take a couple of years off between shows. You know, I'm in that phase of my career where I compete when I got the itch. I'm not competing every year. And I think for a while there, a lot of these athletes were competing every year, and maybe now they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope so. Because I think that there's nothing bad that can come from taking more time off. And it also gives you more time not only to grow and to fit the criteria better, but it gives you also more time to save too. If you're competing year after year after year in multiple shows, that's a lot of money too that you're throwing out the sport. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you guys notice, like with your clients in particular, have you noticed more of a trend of people being more willing to take time off recently?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have. I also think it's well, yeah, but no, I have. I have another idea, but I'll go over it after if we get to talk about this. But yeah, no, I mean, I think people are more willing to take time off because everyone is better and they do have more muscle now, um, in the division they did in like 2017 all the way across the board. And to be competitive, you need more muscle on the way the standard is currently.
Yeah. So I think the first two answers were the ones that I thought made the most sense, the cost, and then taking time off to fit the criteria. I mean, heck, if you look at, you know, Ariana last year, she won her pro card in 2019, took 3 years off and then came back. And, you know, obviously she did well. So you look at that and go, okay, so I've got another girl named Kayleen. She's about to start competing. She did the same thing, 2019 to now. So maybe there will be a natural ebb and flow where there will be some years where the numbers kind of fluctuate down and where they come make a big boom back, or maybe this is just the new norm. It's only time will tell. But you know, certainly Evan, you and I have this talk with some of our more talented athletes. You know, someone like Carla who had a great first showing last year, but in historically, some coaches might have just had her do 2, 3, 4 shows in a season, even took her to nationals just to see how she did. Whereas, you know, you guys shut it down right away and know, okay, you need to make the improvements before you come back.
Yeah, almost 2 years of improvements because we know like what it takes.
Yeah.
I also think, and I've run into a big thing with this, especially with newer competitors, they're really intimidated to get into the sport because the way photos have evolved also since
Yes.
2017.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? That's true.
It is a massive difference. Like Tyler mentioned this where he was talking about Amy Delgado saying like people think she's so dense and she's so big and all this. You see her in person, she is not a big person. But you look at her in photos, you think she's a big person, like just gobs of muscle.
Yeah, but if you put her on stage next to a true novice, it would look like a wellness competitor.
Well, she does.
She does have a lot of muscle.
She does compared to some people, but people will also look at that and think it's way, way more. Like they couldn't even walk around like a normal person outside
Whereas
the stage.
it's only, yeah. There is an allusion to elite genetics. Like she has that tiny waist and those bubbly shoulders and glutes. So there is an allusion to that. Yeah, I think that's very true. Because number 3, the third most common answer I got was they don't like the way the top pros are currently looking. Like
yeah, and that's the other thing I was getting on is I think newer competitors look at top pros and try to compare themselves against them, not regional competitors or early national competitors.
I do wish there was more effort. And you know what's funny is if you go on YouTube and you type in like bikini show day videos, you'll find like true novices and novice girls just coming up in the sport, and you can kind of get on their journeys. You don't see a lot of that on Instagram and social media, right? So maybe if the sport, the NPC, the IFBB, they did more of an effort to show what entry-level athletes should look like, that may help, because that's what got me to compete. Going to my first show, I was so intimidated. I was like, I'll never do a bodybuilding show. When those novice bodybuilders walked out, I was like, I could beat these guys. Like I could be competitive. And that's what I said, okay, I'm going to do the show next year. I don't know if that's being represented on the internet anywhere, true novices.
I mean, that's a really great point. And I think it's like a similar concept to, let's say you're in high school and you want to be a football player, right? Like that's like comparing yourself to, oh, I'm not as good as the professional football players I see, so I'm not going to start. Or because, it's like that same concept. So I agree. I think that the pros, rightfully so, they get a lot of attention. There's a lot of content being put out on them.
It's not even the pros. It's the top 10 at the Olympia. Like, right?
Yeah.
Like that's, it's the pro winner every weekend. No one's looking at like who got third or fifth. They're like, oh, look what's who's. So yeah, I think you're definitely onto something there, Lex.
Yeah, and I mean, and there are some girls that people look up to in the sport that do have a lot of muscle, and it doesn't seem achievable to a lot of people. And we talk about like going on YouTube and typing in like show journeys. I am shocked at how many younger people today don't even use YouTube. Everything is either TikTok reels or something like that. They don't even go on YouTube or look at YouTube anymore. Like they don't have the app on their phone or anything. So it's almost like a generational thing now with long form content, and people kind of everyone wants that quick fix, and they want that quick eye catching post. And a lot of times that's what's going to draw people in, get them interested in the sport. And I think it also could push some people away too, because it doesn't seem achievable.
Yeah.
And also instant gratification. People want it now.
Yeah.
That's kind of the society we're in now. Everyone wants it now. And if they can't get it within a year, it's not worth it to them.
Yeah, I mean, I actually I have two girls right now who they're competing for the first time, and they're both documenting their journey on YouTube. And I think that's really cool to be able to put it out there. I know it can be sometimes kind of scary and intimidating, but I think also as a new competitor, look at it from the standpoint is if you choose to document your journey, you never know who you're going to inspire, but also it serves as like a virtual diary for you, right? So like 5 years from now, you're going to be able to watch your content from when you did your first prep. And that's really cool to think about, right? You're going to be able to see your videos. So I think, I always encourage if girls ever ask me like, oh, I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel. Yeah, it can be a lot of work right off the get-go, and it is a lot of work, but it can be worth it. It really can.
Well, listen, you're preaching to the choir. I started making YouTube videos either 16 or 17 years ago for the sole purpose of I wanted to have it documented. I had no intention. And I've built an entire career around that now. So like, yeah, like anyone that thinks YouTube is overrun is wrong. It's a very small percentage of people that are willing to just put stuff out there. I would break Evan's arm if he would make one YouTube video, right? Like it's like getting over that hump. A lot of people don't do it. And you just don't realize how, like you said, like I remember the first YouTube video I put out, it was like I was in prep, and I mean, listen, no one's watching your first video. They're just not. But I walked into the gym a couple days later and someone's like, hey man, I just saw your video pop up. And I was like, you did? Like, what? They're like, yeah, when's your show? Congratulations, blah, blah, blah. So like it generally, I made a friend off that. His name is Johnny. And so like, you don't know what it's going to do for you. So yeah, not that I'm encouraging, you don't have to do YouTube, but I think there is a lot of value there. And that's actually a lot of the community that I've built has been off, maybe you guys first saw me on YouTube and that's how we know each other. But
yeah, I was watching you when I remember I was in high school, because I remember being in my like childhood bedroom watching your YouTube videos. And that was before I even came down to Florida for college.
Yeah. And Evan and I had met because of old fiance, but yeah, I mean, the reasons were pretty spread out, other than those top three, they don't like the way the top competitors are looking. They're either too muscular or they're too masculine looking. A couple people mentioned PEDs, and I said, like there's definitely, I think, more expectation that you have to do PEDs to be successful in that bikini division, which but I feel like that was the case when I got into the sport 10 years ago. When I started coaching, I remember a lot of girls talking about that. So I don't think that's changed.
Yeah. And I think we can talk a little bit more about that here upcoming, because I got a couple of questions around that. So we can talk a little bit briefly on that topic. But yeah, I don't feel like that's really a new thing.
I feel like that hasn't changed. Like, we talk about that quite often. Can you be successful without PEDs? Absolutely. Can everybody be successful without PEDs? No, right? It's definitely going to come down to who you are. But I don't think PEDs make bikini competitors. Like, you're not going to the Mr. Olympia if you're not on stuff. You can go to the Bikini Olympia and not be on stuff. Like, there's a clear difference in like the muscularity requirements for the highest muscular division of the sport versus the entry level division for women, right? And they're really trying to like focus on the shape and the balance of the bikini division much more. In fact, like, they don't want hard hamstrings and like these, etched out lines on the bikini bodies. So even if you are doing PEDs, you got to be careful, because you don't want to go over the line.
They'll tell. I mean, I know that. I mean, I don't want to like put anybody's name out there, but I've heard like some pros will say that they get feedback from judges at pro shows that they are too muscular in certain areas.
Yeah. So, I've even heard girls get feedback that their faces are getting too masculine, their voices are getting too low. Like, yeah. So there are consequences that come along with those decisions, that if you're not up to date on, what's happening, you can trust a coach too much, or, somebody in your life too much. So
I was gonna say, I think another thing that could be the case with it is people having bad experiences. Because we're kind of in a lull now. I think it's dropping a little bit where everyone wants to be a coach and everyone wants to be a prep coach and everyone can bring someone to stage, and then you have a lot of people. I know we have a lot of clients that have worked with other coaches that had really bad experiences, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I can tell you this, if I would have had a horrible experience at my first show, you think I would have done it again, pushing myself, murdering myself to get into shape,
Right.
and going to a show and have 2 other people in that show and have it all be a letdown? No, I'd never have competed again. But luckily I was surrounded by people I knew that wasn't the case with it. So, and word travels fast, right? So someone will say, hey, I know this person, they did a show, and they'll ask them, hey, how did you like it? Oh, it was horrible. I'd never do that again.
Yeah, that is a great point. And I think that's why we are also eager about what we do, because I mean, I hate getting on the phone. Well, no, I hate it, but I also love it. I love, being able to turn a competitor's experience around, but I always hate hearing, some things that people put up with like former coaching protocols. It's sad. And if you keep up with that for too long of a period of time, it can certainly cause some long-term health implications that do force people out of the sport.
Yeah, there are bad coaching practices out there that cause girls or guys to just not compete anymore. And a false expectation that can be set of what that is normal. And I think honestly, that's I think what you'll see, if these numbers hold up and there are less competitors, what you're going to see is a lot of people that were trying to be coaches are going to go be selling life insurance or go into real estate or get a job at an office. And you're going to see the better coaches continue to progress, because that's when really word of mouth is going to matter. You're backstage at a show. Oh, wow, you look great. Who's your coach? Or online, hey, who coach? That is really where, coaching for me started, was just one client became two became four became 8, over the course of, over more than a decade now. So like, that's really where I think, when you look at those years where the numbers were so inflated, it was like, a lot of competitors were just picking people off of social media that they didn't actually vet them very, very difficultly. You could have maybe one good client at a show and then you'd get a bunch of people from that. Whereas now, they're going to be more, selective. They're going to look at your resume. They're going to look, they're going to want to talk to you on the phone. There's still some coaches out there that really don't put the effort in. So
You should, if you are, and I know we've talked about this before, but if you are hiring a coach, you should talk to them on the phone before hiring them. Like if they don't offer that, that is an immediate red flag.
yeah. No,
Almost they don't require it. It's a red flag to me.
yeah, I would never coach someone before speaking to them. So
No.
yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, lots of reasons here, but I think the biggest one is still just the cost. And then, you combine that with, I'm going to take a little more time off. Maybe they're saving a little bit of money. They're going to be a little bit more selective. Maybe it'll be, one thing I thought about was like, not for nothing, but Charleston and Chattanooga, those are not easiest cities to get to. It is for me. I love Charleston. It's right there. But like, you know, for my competitor that came from Idaho, she had to get a red eye and fly overnight, and you know, it wasn't so easy for her. Same with Chattanooga, whereas junior nationals used to be in Chicago, you know, major city.
Yeah, you know, you're right, Paul. I didn't even think about that. Most of these places the shows are held are not easy to get to.
Well, and that goes along with cost. Costs are up for the promoters. The reason they left Chicago was the cost of that venue after COVID skyrocketed. Same thing is happening in Orlando and Tampa right now. The cost of these venues is skyrocketing. You know, Tim Gardner's had these relationships with these places in Tampa for 20 years. You know, the Hurricane Bay has been around for 20, I think 21 years now. Tampa Pro, probably 16, 17 years. So these, you know, Tim's got these relationships, but if you don't have that, you know, I've literally been told by the promoters in California, their cost for like a hotel, like, you know, conference room, like tripled. Well, if you're not tripling the number of competitors, you're now losing money, and you know, promoters don't stay around if they're losing money. So,
Yeah.
you know, you know.
It's interesting. Well, I'm curious, like those of you who are listening, because I like to look at all the YouTube comments and comment back. So if you guys have any other like theories or thoughts, I'd
Yeah.
be curious to see some of the
Yeah,
comments.
I got one more. Because I think it gets confusing too with people understanding what shows, how many pro cards are giving out at what shows, and how you get your pro card at each show. It's not consistent between shows. I mean, from year to year, it is. But I remember even a few years ago, you know, it used to be top two at North Americans for bikini, and then it randomly switched to top one. You had to win your class for bikini. And so I think some consistency based on how things would be given out. And I think a lot of people, you know, at least earlier on, maybe thought if they went to a national show and won their class, they would automatically get a pro card. Not if they won their class, they would still have to go and get top four.
Yeah,
So,
I had a
you know,
girl
just
get
give me some
second at North
education too.
Americans, and she called me and told me she got her pro card, and the next day she's like, "Oh, I guess I didn't get my pro card. I got second." I was like, "Oh."
Well, I
So
think it was, I don't know if it was I think it was last year, maybe. I remember earlier in the year, I think they had announced that they were going to do
they
like
did.
top two at North Americans. Yeah. And then it changed because I remember I was really confused about that too. And then I fact checked myself and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. They actually did at the beginning of the year say they were going to do top two, and they ended up changing that.
Yeah, and I think North Americans could justify giving out two because they've actually had bigger numbers than USA's, which does give out twos. So in 2020, North Americans had 275 in bikini. USA's had 183, right? So why did they get 16 pro cards versus 8, right? So like you can look at the numbers and historically go, okay, what's the right thing to do here? I feel like it should be a floating number, right? Like if you have X amount, you get out this many pro cards. This, you know, because if you
I
go
agree.
back to like the year 2017 at nationals when they had 276 competitors, 16 pro cards is not a lot. But
It
if you
also,
go a couple of years later, 2020, they had 149 competitors, still gave out 16 pro cards, right? So like, you know, 2020 was obviously the year of, you know, the COVID, and they moved it from Miami to Orlando. And it was like, I think it was in like, it was the week before Christmas. It was just a weird year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I want to also say too, maybe just the quality is better now, because I remember even a few years ago, there'd be a lot of competitors at shows. And I'm like, okay, probably need to be at this national show because they really don't have a shot to do anything.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I think it's fairly similar these days. It's just with lower numbers as far as like talent.
Yeah. Listen, there was 52 people at the show last weekend. The overall was stacked. That was a pro show. That was not like a bunch of girls. Like they judged them for probably 10 minutes. And I mean, they made a lot of moves. Yeah, it was very, very okay. And you
That's
could
what
see
it
them.
looked like from the outside looking in. It looked like it was a pretty competitive show despite the low numbers.
Yeah, no. The class winners were spectacular, like very, very good overall. Even Sandy like stopped before they announced and said, just so you guys know, like all of you look like pros up there. Like, you know, we only give out 4, but all of you. So yeah, and she doesn't always say that. That's not lip service. So yeah, so the quality is still there, which speaks to people taking more time off, being a little bit more strategic with their time and their money, picking shows. But yeah, 52 girls, and they give out 4 pro cards. So almost 10%? Is that right? Golly, that seems awfully high.
No, I agree with you. I think if they could somehow regulate it where they got the total amount of competitors and then they gave like a percentage
Yeah.
the card, I think that would be a really smart strategy. Because if you're always, like for this past show this weekend, they always give out 4 pro cards. But what happens if there's only 40 girls? Like, should they still give out 4, or should maybe they tweak that number? So
I mean,
think
honestly, I would have, this is going to sound weird because I'm a coach, and don't get me wrong, I love getting my pro cards, but like when they have a number that low, I think they should have dropped it to 6 classes instead of 8,
yeah,
because that way you're going to have more competitive classes. Instead of having 3 in C, you might have had like 8, right? And then give out 3 pro cards, half the classes, because that's what they do in figure. Figure has 3 pro cards because they have 6 classes.
Yeah, I think that is an issue because they go up in such small increments for height that, and there's so many classes that if there's only a certain number of competitors, they should cut down the number of classes. And they do that at most regional shows.
Yeah, the regional shows, they'll do 6, not 8 if they have less. They'll even do 4. If they only have like 20 girls, I've seen them do 4. So yeah, it's interesting. I think, all right, we probably went down the rabbit hole enough on this. Love to hear you guys' feedback, questions, comments, because I tell you what, in 4 weeks when I go to junior nationals, we'll do a follow-up, because now I'm curious to see what happens at junior nationals and universe and USA's. And I'll tell you right now, I have way more pros than I've ever had. So I feel like this trend is not just a one-off show. I think it's going to be this whole year.
yeah.
Probably will.
All right. So what questions did you have, Lexie, on your
Okay, so I got a couple of pretty good ones. So let's talk first about, because I got a couple on this topic. So the first one is, when do girls make the decision to stop being natural and take PEDs? Like, how do you know when it is time? So I think we could just maybe talk a little bit about things to consider if you are somebody who maybe is considering that route. Because I feel like this is a lot of my questions were, I did get a lot about this, but I feel like a lot of these girls have mentioned like how this isn't really discussed a lot. So if we could just give some like general things we talk about or consider when a girl maybe wants to go the enhanced route.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a conversation you have to have, but I would strongly suggest not even considering it until you have multiple years of training and nutrition under your belt, consistently training for the sport, and then a few competitions under your belt. I don't think, jumping in right away, you just don't know what your body's capable of.
No. I agree with that 100%. And I also think another thing to consider, because I know some people will be like, well, I've been lifting for, my whole life, or I've been lifting for, X amount of time. But it's like, how long have you truly been lifting for the sport, right? Or how long have you been consistent with lifting? Some people will say, oh, I've been lifting my entire life, but maybe they've had a year where they're all in, and then the next year they're kind of like wishy-washy, and like, that, that's another conversation. So I think you have to consider your training history and how much of that has been spent training specifically for the sport and for that criteria.
Yeah, it's obviously, I think it's a personal decision. I think that it's something I don't recommend younger people typically doing. I think that's probably not the smartest move.
Yeah.
It's, how dedicated are you? Do you have all your other ducks in a row? If you have all your ducks in a row and you're committed to it and you love it, and that's the route you want to go with it, look, I mean, that's a route you want to go. You just kind of have to weigh, your options on there and what's important to you, and just go in there with your eyes wide open. I'm not going to be someone that walks in, and if someone says, hey, this is something I really want to do, then, it's a free world. It's a free country. You can do what you want to do with things. I want people to value their health. I want people to go into everything with eyes wide open and understand what it is that they're doing. And just like with food, right? Like, if you look at food and you can make an honest decision because you understand what that food is, then that's on you. You can make that decision with that. I think that it's not an easy one fits all answer for people. I wish it was, but it's not. It's very individual. And of course, we could give our opinions on what people could do or should do, but it's ultimately a personal decision on that. And I would also recommend too that you do a lot of research yourself. You talk to people that you trust and people that actually know, because some of the scariest stuff I've heard are for people that are girls that aren't even competitors. These are just girls that go to LA Fitness,
Mm.
and their boyfriend tells them stuff and they take some stuff. And it's like, okay, first of all, that's way more than most girls on Olympia stage take. And there's no reason you need to be doing that. So I think there's a lot of misconception too, on what people take and how much people take and what actually works and what doesn't work and what has side effects and what doesn't have side effects. There's just so much information and misinformation out there that it can get difficult with it. And look, if it's somebody that's been lifting for a long time and you're 35 and you understand like what the substances are and the purpose of them, and you want to do it, then who am I to say you couldn't do that? It's just, you want to be smart, and I wish there was an easier answer than that to it.
Yeah. I also think part of it has to do with like what is your goal as a competitor? Like if you're just, wanting to do the sport for fun, and some people that is their goal. They just want to, constantly improve upon their past package and just kind of do it for fun. Like, is it really worth adding in something like a PED for that? So I think, just what your long-term goal is really important when you want to factor in the decision as well.
Yeah, honestly, it took me a long time to even be open to the conversation. I was pretty committed to, coaching girls naturally. I did find out that some girls were on stuff because they didn't want to disappoint me. And then I started having some of my favorite people go to other coaches because they were more open about putting them on stuff. So I no longer have the stigma. Like I'm happy to let girls do what they want to do. And I've educated myself on the substances, how to use them, and how to do them properly, so that we're, now my stance is more, I refuse to coach women that want or are willing to do things that are going to kind of forever change their characteristics.
Yeah.
That's where I draw the line. I'm not interested in masculinizing my female competitors. And it's mostly for the reason that I think a lot of competitors don't realize what they're signing up for. And I don't want to be that person that in 10 years they go, man, I wish I'd never worked with that coach because my voice is 4 octaves deeper and my face aged 10 years and I've got these deep lines now and I'm not interested in that. And I certainly don't believe it's necessary to be successful. And if it is, if that's what it requires for you to be successful, great. Then go there. It just won't be under my watch. I'd prefer to keep the process mostly about nutrition, training, overall well-being. And if you get a little bit of support because it helps you build muscle, helps you get a little bit leaner, whatever that is, then that's about where I'm comfortable with. And honestly, you've got competitors like Corey that are openly talking about this stuff. So it's no longer as much cloak and dagger. You've also got the idea now of hormone therapy clinics that are willing to do your blood work. And you can actually get under the hood and see what's going on a person. And it's not as, much guesswork anymore. So for me, that has taken away the concern, because now they're under doctor's treatment. And if their doctor and them and me are all on the same page, hey, let's go, right? That shit works. Anavar works. Like these, it's not around for no reason, right? So these substances can be very beneficial with minimal side effects if done properly. The problem is, we've all seen the situations where the nutrition was so bad, the training setup was so bad. The only thing holding these people together is the 7 compounds that their coach had them on. And that's not how it should be. Pretty strong.
I run right in there with you, Paul, with it. It's my big no-no is, look, if somebody wants to do something that's going to, that's higher in the virilization scale, that's going to bring on male characteristics with it, I'm just not comfortable with that. If that's a personal decision they want to make, that's totally fine. And there's plenty of coaches out there that'd be more than happy to go down that route with them. I just don't want to be that, because again, I don't want them to look back on that in 10 years and say, geez, I wish I wouldn't have never done that, because you cannot unring that bell. And when you can't unring that bell on it, I don't want to be, the reason or even looked at as the reason why that's the case.
Yeah, like kind of to stem off of that question, another thing I want to bring up, because this was another question I got, was somebody said they were asking about PEDs and they said, I really want to do NPC, but I never want to do PEDs. And I think it's important to recognize that just because NPC isn't a quote unquote natural federation, it by no means means that every competitor on stage is on a PED, especially at the amateur level. I mean, I don't know what I would throw out as numbers, but you can absolutely compete in the NPC without being on PEDs. So if anybody out there is wondering that, like that's the answer with that.
Oh yeah, you can win. I mean, honestly, like you can win overalls. You can even go to nationals, win overalls. I mean, I've done it. I've seen my athletes go to the Olympia natural. So it's not as if it's a requirement. And any coach that tells you that, if you're new to training and you don't like, that is a coach that is probably lazy and they just know this is going to be a shortcut for them. They're looking at you like a racehorse that's going to have a 1 or 2 year career. We look at like you're a marathon runner and you're going to have a long career, right? We're not trying to rush you to the finish line to get a picture, brag about how many pro cards we got. And then you never hear about these people that are turning pro, their careers are over, versus I've had the same pros. Every girl I've ever taken to the Olympia was their first time going to the Olympia. So I'm very happy that like, that's how for me, that's how I'm happy coaching. Some people will tell you that's not how the sport is. That's fine. That is how the sport is for me. I am not trying to run people into the ground in 1 or 2 years, get everything out of them, and then just leave them gasping for air, you know, questioning their fitness experience.
No, it's a big thing with me is make sure that your nutrition's in check and make sure your training's in check. Make sure you understand that. There's a lot of girls that have come over to me that came over and they were on a significant amount of compounds with the previous coach, and I said, well, hey, send me some videos here of just a simple hip thrust, and I look at that and I'm like, you don't even know how to do a basic hip thrust,
Right?
like the most basic things.
Or you don't know what intensity is. Someone says 3 sets of 8, so you go doing 3 sets of 8. You could have done 3 sets of 28 with that weight. Learning, and that takes time, and that's the fun part of the journey. Don't shortcut that because you jumped on a substance that allowed you to put a bunch of muscle on, but also left you with hair loss, and you look 5 years older.
If you're lucky.
Right.
And look, there are smart, easy. There are smart ways to do things with low side effects too.
Yeah.
Absolutely is the case. And if I could leave anyone with a tip, it's less is more in the vast majority of cases.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I've seen amazing things with just a little assistance and a proper training and nutrition protocol. Listen, especially the bikini division, it's not that far off of our baseline of muscle to look amazing, right? They don't want you to look like a women's physique pro. So, and the other nice thing is if you take your time to build the muscle, you keep it. It sticks around.
Yeah. And that's why you see so many masters competitors having that density, because a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have lifted to some capacity for a good majority of their life.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I have, okay, so one kind of like, I guess this is a really quick one, but I feel like this would be something cool to end on. So somebody asked if there is an athlete that is surprising us this season. So maybe like a pro, any pros that you feel like have kind of come out and surprised either of you guys this season?
I mean, it's a bad question to ask me because I know every pro.
I guess that is true. I'm trying to think if there's anybody. I guess
I think it's too early because right now every show winner has been either Amy or Ashley, which is no surprise. So
right.
I think Vanya'd probably be the name, winning the Arnold UK, getting 3rd at the Pittsburgh. She's the one, but then,
yeah,
that's not a surprise to me. She's looked great for years. She just continues to move up.
Right. I guess there was a girl who, and I'm really curious and hopeful that she continues to compete and do really well. I think her name was Chantel Hall. I think she's Cash's client, and she was at Girl Power. She got 3rd, above Allison Testu, and I think a lot of us were like, "Whoa!" Like, where'd she come from? So I'll be curious to see how what she does the rest of the season if she continues to compete and works her way up.
Yeah, Chantel beat Lana 2 years ago at a show in California. She just came out of nowhere, got second, I think, to Ashley Kay, and Lana got third. And Lana had just gotten second like 3 shows in a row. So we were trying for that win. So when she got beat by her, I knew who she was. Very talented competitor, needs a little more size to her lower body, but she will be a contender for an Olympia spot. I think she's probably coming back in the fall, if I had to guess, because she wasn't at the last show. I don't know. She's not on any list this weekend, and we got very small shows this weekend coming up.
Yeah. What do we have? We have 2. We have Clash and then the one in Louisiana, right?
Optimum. But Optimum is historically one of those shows where there's not a lot of Olympia competitors.
Oh, you know
Ashley
what?
Kay
Yeah,
decided
I
to jump
saw
in.
Ashley Kay's on that list for this weekend. Ashley Kay and then Sierra Swan, I think, and she's the
Yep.
one who won it last year. So
Right. So Sierra was probably planning to get her qualification there. The chances dropped. Obviously, you can still beat her. Then you got Miami next weekend, where I think Sierra won that 2 years ago. So I'm sure she's planning on that one too. I've heard rumors Ashley's doing that one too. So, we'll just see what it'll be this season. The Clash is actually more the wide open show. You've got Maria Acosta is, a girl who's been doing well this season. You got Brittany Hamilton, who was second at Wasatch. And then a couple girls like Yulia Baba, who's been to the Olympia. So, it's going to be an interesting. I'm telling everybody now, watch out for Jessica Miller. She looks a lot better. Obviously she's got work to do to work her way up, but it'll be a fun show to watch because it doesn't have that top 10 Olympian in the list.
yeah, I love those types of shows. I love when it's kind of wide open, and I love seeing girls that you wouldn't expect to maybe place high, like just kind of sneak up there. I think I don't know. I think that's fun to observe.
Yeah, that's honestly, like, the sport is on paper very predictable. So it's very exciting when you get a name that just pops in, like, an international name or somebody making a pro debut. As much as we talk about social media, some girls don't post a lot. You don't really see them until they walk out under those lights. And then you're like, whoa, who's that?
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, you know what? Remind me, you know her name, Paul. The girl that won the Olympia last year, the amateur Olympia.
Sharon Ramos.
Yes, I think didn't she get second this past weekend? I
She
think.
got second at the New York Pro.
Yeah. So
But I don't think anybody from Pittsburgh was there. It was
no.
literally just
Well,
Amy and Sharon.
Valeria, is that her name? Valeria.
Okay. Yeah,
I think
but
she was there. She was there, but
okay, so Sharon beat her because I think Sharon was 10th at Pittsburgh. So she moved up from 10th to second, right? Which is great. Valeria was, I want to say 6th or 7th or 8th. Maybe she was 8th at Pittsburgh. No, 7th. I don't know. So she finished in the top 5 at New York. So she moved up technically, but not, she went backwards compared to Sharon, right? So like different judging panels, different week, different peak, different things, but it was a week apart. So for Sharon, that was a huge momentum thing. But I told you guys the first show of the year, watch out for Sharon Ramos.
I know you did. You did. So
yeah,
she's
when
gonna
you
be.
see her in person, she's very impressive,
Yeah.
But the thing she's got to worry about now is she's been competing nonstop since November.
Yeah.
She turned pro. She did a show in November, turned pro in November, did a pro debut in December, or was it late November? And then she's been out since the beginning of the season. So, fatigue starts to set in. You have trouble staying leaner. So we'll see how that goes for her.
Yeah.
She's not on any list this weekend. So she may be shutting it down, right? Like she may be at the point where she goes, you know what, I need to go back to the drawing board, come out in the fall. I don't know if she wants to apply, try to get on the Olympia stage this year, but she's got the goods. So whenever she's on, she's going to be in the mix.
Yep. Agreed.
Any other questions on your Q&A? Because we're getting.
We could do. I'll do one more. Okay. We'll do a quick one. Okay, so this question, I answered this on Instagram, but I do think it's kind of a neat one maybe to talk about because I feel like a lot of people don't think about this. Somebody asked, should you, as a bikini competitor, should you pose on both sides? Like, should you practice your front pose on both sides? So I'm curious. I have an answer for this, but what do you guys typically think about that?
I'd like to hear your answer.
Okay, well, so I typically say that I've kind of changed my thinking about this over time, because one thing I started to notice with a lot of girls, not every competitor, but and you can even observe this sometimes when you're watching pro shows, is sometimes when girls hit their back pose, they have a little bit of like a hip imbalance, or one glute looks a little bit higher than the other. And it's not that they actually have like a true like genetic imbalance, but a lot of times why they have that is because they pose really, really hard on that one side, like in their front pose, that low back becomes really, really tight. So it can kind of throw off their hips in the back pose. So I say you don't necessarily need to practice both sides like to perfection, right? You're always going to have that one side that's probably a lot better and stronger than the other. But I think that it can be beneficial to practice that other side, not necessarily for the sake of that you're going to have to hit that on stage, but just to kind of even things out a little bit so you don't have that weird like imbalance in your back pose.
Yeah, I think obviously you're going to have your strong side, right? And that's the side you need to practice on. I think every few years it's probably smart to take a look at the other side and just see. I mean, because I switched my front post side this past year and it was way better because when my chest went up, it completely kind of changed how my body looked on the other side and made my chest look way, way bigger. And I had posed on another side for 6 years. I randomly decided to change it and I think it looked far, far better. So I think giving the other side a chance especially after consistent training for a while and some muscle growth and seeing if anything changes is absolutely beneficial with it. But I think making sure that you can nail that front post first before you start trying to swap things up is definitely the most important part.
Yeah, the body changes so much in prep. I think it's definitely worth looking at both sides throughout. I've also actually seen some people get some injuries because they always pose to the one side, right? So I would say practice both. Obviously, you're going to have one that's more comfortable. But Kathy Seitz, I brought her name up early in this post, so she's going to get tagged. Somebody's going to tag her. So when she won the overall at the Clash, she was posing one way, and when she won the overall Universe, she was posing another way. We just noticed the other front pose was stronger for her. We switched it up. Did that make the difference? Maybe a little bit, but yeah, I mean, they should be pretty similar. I mean, you should have pretty good symmetry. Some people will have a little bit better, like, tie-in in their waist. Some people will have a little more glute pop. So as you prep, your body changes. I think it's a great idea to look at both sides, get comfortable in both sides. Heck, if they're both pretty similar, depending on where you're at on stage, it might be beneficial, to do both, depending on the angle you're at.
Yeah. I also think for girls that have like, if you have a lot of tattoos, like if you have a really big sleeve
Oh yeah,
covering your shoulder cap, or like some girls have a lot of tattoos down their leg and it's like covering that side of their glute, I would encourage a girl in that scenario to not have her front pose on that side, because it's just gonna cover up, that potential shoulder or
Yep.
that glute. So that's another thing to think about too.
Yep. I've definitely had girls switch their front pose because of tattoos.
Look, a sleeve is cool. I think they're badass with it. But this is also a bodybuilding show. It's not a tattoo show. And you want to be able to see the definition. You want to be able to see the muscle. And yes, you can use things like tattoo cover up, but it does muddy it. So
I wouldn't even use the tattoo cover up. Like, they don't care about the tattoos as long as it's not hiding shape, right? It's hiding separation.
It will, though, if it's big enough.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, I've even had girls with something on their leg say, like, let's just switch sides, because my eye keeps going to that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will get upset. They'll say, oh, they just didn't pick me because of my tattoos. It's like, well, no, it has nothing to do with the tattoo. It's a bodybuilding show and they're looking for separation. They're looking for detail. And if you can't see it because it's all covered in ink, I don't know what you want me to tell you about that.
Yeah, if you take two identical twins with the exact same physique, cover one with tattoos and have one with none, yeah, that's where it's going to go. This is a bodybuilding sport. It's not, they don't care about tattoos. They only care about judging the physique. And if they can't judge the physique because of a tattoo, that's a choice you made. I know they really try to see through it. I remember a girl got her pro card that had a freaking chest plate. She had like wings on her chest and she got her pro card, right? So like,
yeah. I mean, I can think of some top level pros too that have some tattoos in some crazy areas, but I think as long as it doesn't cover up what the judges need to see, it's not an issue.
You know who has sneaky tattoos is Daraja. She got a lot of them, but you'll never see them when she poses. They're all like in these like unique spots where you just don't see them, but she's got a lot of tattoos.
Well, she's so good that like, yeah, you're not even drawn to the tattoos on stage. You just see that like that captivation.
Yeah, but she doesn't have like a tribal armband or something that like, pulls your eye to anything. They're very like, I think they're
Oh,
strategically placed. Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, we can end on that one because I know we've been going for a little while. So we can maybe do another Q&A another upcoming Q&A and answer more questions there too.
Yeah, and I think I'm hoping this will create more discussion around the sport. I think it would be a really
Yeah.
good idea. Maybe Lexie, we could do an update on the cost of competing. We can talk about the
Yeah.
average cost of hotels,
Yeah,
national
let's
show,
do that. Yeah, let's plan to
NPC
do that.
card, tanning. I just had a girl tell me that her tanning is $175.
Ugh.
And I'm like,
Sounds about right.
that is
Yeah.
that is pretty, I
And
think.
I've even noticed too, because I'll just look for fun. Like the makeup artists that I typically use, like their prices are going up too. And nothing against them, because I know that they have to travel to shows too. They have to raise up
Yep.
their prices. So, prices are going up all around. So yeah, I definitely think doing an updated episode on the costs of prep and just laying that all out there, we should definitely do that upcoming.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think I'm inspired this week. I'm going to make a post of a true novice competitor. I want to put out more information around entry level competitors, because even I, as a coach, what do I post? Brittany, Ariana, Daraja. It's so easy to get caught up in their physiques because they're fucking amazing. That sometimes even I'm like, oh, no one wants to see this. But I'm gonna make some posts this week of some of my true novice competitors, because like I think that's good for people to see that side of the sport, and
Yeah.
maybe there's just not enough
Yeah.
of that going on.
I mean, and just to go down more a little bit for another second on the cost side of things, it's not just the flight. It's if you want to Uber to the hotel, that prices has gone up significantly. And then once you get to the hotel, let's say you rent a car, those have gone up. We talked about that, Paul, right?
Yeah.
And then almost every hotel is going to charge for parking now, mostly $50 a night, most of these places with it. And just everything is more expensive. It's not just the shows, it's not just the travel, it's not just the hotels, it's not just the food. It's literally prices are everything. When everything's up like 20%, that really adds up.
Right. And then obviously bodybuilding is a luxury sport, right?
Mhm.
Nobody's making a living at bodybuilding.
Well, and this makes sense too. Like if the masters price or not prices, masters numbers are going up, it kind of makes sense because like those people typically have a little bit more money to spend, right? Compared to the
You're talking
younger.
about those people. Are we a different class of people?
You got those
Lexie?
people, Lexie?
Am I one
No,
of those people? I'm a master's.
You're an ageist.
I love my masters competitors.
Those
No.
people. I'm offended. I'm officially going on Reddit and making a post about you.
Oh yeah, you do it. You go badmouth me on Reddit.
Yeah, but you're 100% right. Masters competitors. I know I have a lot more money than I did when I was 28 at 48, right? So like, and this is a conversation I have with competitors is like, okay, let's do a local show where you can sleep in your own bed, drive over for check-ins and drive home. And the only cost you have is your NPC card. And hey, we'll do a DIY pro tan kit,
Yeah.
Listen, you can do bodybuilding on the cheap. People will be like, oh, the cost of eating for a body. I go, I always save money when I'm in prep because I'm
Yeah,
going
so-
to eat anyway. I just eat out a lot
Eat.
less and I portion control. So like,
Honestly, and we can, what we can even do too, like when we do the episode on the cost of competing, we can have like a little segment too where we talk about maybe personal areas like we've saved in personally, because there are definitely some areas you can save in. I don't want anybody to listen to this thinking, oh, I can't ever compete because it's like so
the first year I went to the Arnold, I think I slept in a room with 6 people. I was like, I just want to go. I'll split the room with you guys, whatever. And we all just ended up, and then a couple more people piled in. So yeah, it was a terrible weekend because I didn't sleep. But like, I don't know. When I was broke, I had 2 roommates. Like, I don't know. We'll get into the finances of life, and you can get Coach Paul's life lessons on how to,
perfect.
how to budget.
Well, also, if you guys are listening, be sure to grab a ticket for our Texas seminar in.
Bro, you better grab one quick. They're
I
more
know.
than 50% sold out.
I know. That's why I'm saying it now. Because if you have not gotten a ticket and you want to come, I would like hop on it now. Because who knows? By the time this is out, there could be like 2 left. Because we're capping it at I think 35.
It's capped. Like last year, I think we capped it at 30 and we added 5 because we sold out. So yeah. We're into the 20s already. So giddy up.
Giddy up.
Anything else, guys?
Good to
I don't-
go.
All right. I will see you this weekend, although this video will be out next weekend at the Clash this weekend. So when this one comes out, I will see you at Miami. The week
Bye,
of Miami.
guys.
All right, bye, guys.
See ya.